Good afternoon. Can I remind members that social distancing measures are in place in the Chamber and across the Holyrood campus, and I ask that members take care to observe these measures, including when entering and exiting the Chamber. Please only use the aisles and walkways to access your seat and when moving around the Chamber. The first item of business is consideration of motion numbers 62 and 63 in the name of Nicola Sturgeon on appointment of Scottish Ministers and Junior Scottish Ministers. I shall invite the First Minister to move motions 62 and 63. I then intend to invite each party to make a short contribution, and thereafter I will invite the First Minister to reply. I call on the First Minister to speak to and move the motions, and I should say that I invite members who wish to speak in the debate to press their request to speak buttons.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I rise to seek Parliament's approval that Shona Robertson, Keith Brown, Mary Goujon and Angus Robertson be appointed as Scottish Ministers, and that George Adam, Tom Arthur and Mary McCallan be appointed as Scottish Junior Ministers. I've appointed, Presiding Officer, a serious government for the serious times that we live in. This government brings together experience with new talent, and it is a team that can, and indeed already has, get straight down to business. In nominating these new Cabinet Secretaries and Ministers, I want to first of all pay tribute to those who are departing government. Among Fiona Hislop's many achievements during her long years in government, she oversaw the abolition of university tuition fees, expanded the Scottish Government's international footprint and, more recently, worked tirelessly to support jobs and the economy during the pandemic. Fergus Ewing has also performed a number of ministerial roles, and I want to note in particular his tireless work fighting for Scotland's rural sector since the Brexit vote, and indeed for being a tireless champion for Scotland's farmers and crofters during one of the most challenging and uncertain periods our agriculture sector has ever faced. Both Fiona and Fergus are very dear friends of mine and indeed of everybody on these benches, as well as colleagues, and they leave government with my and our sincere thanks and with our very best wishes. Turning now to today's appointments, firstly, Shona Robertson is returning to government after a period where, amongst many other things, she chaired the SNP's Social Justice and Fairness Commission. In her new brief as Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice, Housing and Local Government, Shona will be responsible for many of our government's key priorities, including delivering 100,000 affordable homes, tackling child poverty and developing the potentially transformative policy of a minimum income guarantee. Keith Brown returns to government as Justice Secretary, bringing formidable experience to that role. Keith will be responsible for continuing the government's reform of the justice system, as well as work to reduce reoffending. And having served in the Armed Forces himself, Keith will also be Veterans Minister. Mary Goujon joins the Cabinet with the Rural Affairs and Islands brief. Before her current role as Public Health Minister, she of course served as Minister for Rural Affairs and the Natural Environment, so she is well versed in the sensitivities and challenges facing her in her new role, and I'm pleased to say she is already working hard to defend Scotland's farmers from the Tories' proposed tariff-free trade deal with Australia, which, if it goes ahead, will be devastating to our farmers and for that reason must be resisted. Finally, Angus Robertson becomes Cabinet Secretary for the Constitution, External Affairs and Culture. During his time in the House of Commons, Angus developed a well-earned reputation, not just for building bridges across party lines, but also forging friendships internationally, making him ideally suited to this role. Angus will also be charged with fulfilling the government's manifesto commitment, endorsed by the electorate in our election victory, of ensuring that Scotland's future is in Scotland's hands and that after the COVID crisis, the people of Scotland will have the opportunity to choose our future. Presiding Officer, a number of other colleagues remain in Cabinet but take up new and expanded roles, reflecting the challenges that lie ahead. John Swinney continues as Deputy First Minister in a new cross-government role designed to reflect the cross-portfolio nature of our recovery from COVID. He will quickly bring people together to discuss the next steps in our recovery from the pandemic, with the first meeting of the cross-party steering group in COVID recovery expected to take place next week. I've asked Humza Yousaf to become Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care, filling the enormous shoes left by Jean Freeman. Protecting and remobilising our NHS is one of the biggest and most immediate priorities of this government in the months ahead, and I have every confidence that Humza will lead that process well. Humza and his ministerial team will also take forward the delivery of the National Care Service, which will be perhaps the biggest public service reform in this entire Parliament. Shelley-Ann Somerville has proven herself a highly capable Cabinet Secretary in the Social Security brief, and I'm delighted that she has accepted the position of Education and Skills. Her immediate focus will be on supporting our young people and students and, of course, those who support them through what has been an unprecedented period of disruption to education. But her overarching mission will be to continue our work in closing the educational attainment gap. Kate Forbes will take on the new expanded brief of finance and the economy. She will continue to lead on the immediate and pressing challenges of supporting businesses and jobs in the current period of economic uncertainty, but she'll also be charged with looking to the future as we seek to build a more sustainable economy which works for everyone. That includes delivering our commitments to establishing a Women's Business Centre, a Green Jobs Fund, a Rural Entrepreneur Fund, taking forward work to explore the benefits of a 4-day working week and much more besides. Of course, as we have faced the challenge of COVID, we also face the climate emergency. I've decided to appoint a Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero Energy and Transport to bring together the key actions we need to take to meet our net zero target. I've noted commentary over the past 24 hours to the effect that there is a tension in this brief between responsibility for our net zero target and also for two of the biggest emitting parts of society, to which I would gently say that is precisely the point. We must make transformational change in our transport and energy systems to deliver net zero, and Michael Matheson has been appointed to drive that change. If I can turn now to the junior ministerial appointments, George Adam performed the often difficult role of Chief Whip with good humour and a mostly respectful attitude towards colleagues, two skills which I know will serve him well in his new role as Minister for Parliamentary Business. Tom Arthur will also be hanging up his whip, so to speak, to take on the role of Minister for the important roles of public finance, planning and community wealth, a promotion that is well merited given his performance on the backbenches over the past Parliament. And finally, Mary McCallan is to become Minister for Environment, Biodiversity and Land Reform. Mary is an energy and environment lawyer by trade, and along with colleagues, she established Rebel Law Scotland, a group of lawyers seeking to use the law to deliver social justice. Although she is a newly elected MSP, Mary is no stranger to government nor to many MSPs and other parties, having supported Rosanna Cunningham in delivering the climate change plan. And finally, I'm very pleased that Ash Denham, Christina McKelvey, Jenny Gilruth, Ivan McKee, Jamie Hepburn, Richard Lochhead, Marie Todd, Kevin Stewart, Claire Hockey, Graham Day and Ben McPherson have all agreed to continue serving in government. Angela Constance will also continue the vital work she had started as Minister for Drugs Policy back in December, underlining our and my own commitment to tackling the unacceptable toll that drugs take in our society. Presiding Officer, all of these appointments today have obviously my full confidence, but whatever our political allegiances in this chamber, I hope, indeed I'm sure, that everyone will wish them success in their new roles. And let me conclude by saying this. In the first days of this new Parliament, much has been said, and I believe said with sincerity, about all of us working across parties, about building consensus and, where we share interests and ambitions, trying to take these forward together. I expect my ministers to behave and conduct themselves in that way, starting as soon as they are appointed by meeting their counterparts across the other parties. However, let me also say this government and these ministers have been elected and have been appointed to deliver on the manifesto that we stood and won the election on. The first part of that is to deliver on the commitments in our first 100 days plan, and that work has started already. I have never taken support for the SNP for granted, and I never will, and nor have I ever claimed that we have a monopoly on wisdom. Clearly, we don't. We stand ready to listen to and adopt good ideas wherever they come from, if that is in the interests of the people that we serve. I've never known a parliamentary session, perhaps with the never actually known a parliamentary session to begin with so many challenges facing our country, indeed many of them facing the whole world. In the face of a global public health emergency, unprecedented economic uncertainty and, of course, the looming climate and nature catastrophe, we should not, any of us, waste time in petty squabbling or political games. We have legitimate differences and we should debate those respectfully, but we should, where we can, work together in the interests of the country. There are many new faces in this chamber, and this new session, I think, represents something of a generational shift in the short history of our re-established Parliament. So I know that all MSPs are keen now to repay the trust that the electorate has placed in all of us, and I can say, Presiding Officer, that my new ministerial team is absolutely itching to get to work. So I move the motions in my name and hope that they will command support across Parliament today.
Thank you. I now call on Alex Cole-Hamilton to speak to and move Amendment 62.1.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, there are days in the proceedings of this Parliament that carry a certain gravity beyond those of normal business. The swearing-in of new MSPs has happened last week, the occasion of first speeches, and the appointment of a new government. On days like this, it is incumbent on opposition members like myself to put aside any ill feeling or enmity and wish with all sincerity good fortune on those appointed to high office today. And despite the amendment I move this afternoon, I do offer those good wishes. But Liberal Democrats cannot support the appointment of a Cabinet Secretary for the Constitution. On Tuesday, the First Minister signalled a welcome change in both tone and in direction. Her first act was to create a ministerial office dedicated to the national recovery from COVID-19. But that was immediately undermined by her appointment of a Cabinet Secretary who will exist, first and foremost, to advance the cause of independence. The government have stated that this role covers Europe as well. But, Presiding Officer, the impact of Brexit will be felt by and dealt with in every ministry established today. It should, by necessity, now become everybody's problem. So let's accept this for what it is. When Angus Robertson left Westminster, he was appointed to lead an independent supporting think tank. Today, with his appointment to government in this role, it feels as if the work of that organisation has been brought into public ownership. Big, important questions face this country over the coming years on mental health, the drug deaths emergency, climate change and educational attainment. But for Liberal Democrats, the answer to none of these lie in the tired, old arguments about currency and about borders. As such, we believe that there should be not 1 minute of either ministerial or civil service time afforded to such a brief. This reshuffle has seen the vital and substantial issues of both mental health and social care conflated into one junior ministerial role, when we would much rather, as Liberal Democrats, have seen them both elevated to cabinet level, given the gravity and the severity of the problems that arise in those areas. The First Minister offered the electorate a clear and unambiguous commitment in the election campaign that their national recovery would come first. Yet her appointment of such a ministerial office undermines that commitment, and as such I move the amendment in my name. But laying aside that note of opposition, I do want to use the remainder of my time to recognise some of those appointed to government today, in particular those from the 2016 intake like Mary Goujon and Tom Arthur, both promoted today. Now, I don't know a member of this Parliament who does not like Kate Forbes personally. Kate had the role of Cabinet Secretary for Finance thrust upon her just days before this country was caught in the teeth of a public health emergency that will have far-reaching economic consequences. She has met that challenge with heart and with inclusivity, and we wish her well. To Humza Yousaf, who was appointed yesterday to the health portfolio, I know that everyone here wants you to succeed. Lives will depend on your actions, but beyond the crisis caused by COVID-19, do not lose sight of those emergencies in our health service that predate the coronavirus pandemic. the glacial waits for first-line mental health treatment, the countless thousands of our fellow Scots who are suffering and in pain due to the backlog of deferred operations. Finally, I want to welcome Shirley-Ann Somerville to her place as Education Secretary. I've always been impressed by her. She has a formidable work rate and strong values, and she is going to need them in this role, for I fear that she inherits a crisis in the making in the assessments that have replaced this year's exam diet. Presiding Officer, to serve your country from a ministerial office is a privilege craved by many but afforded to very few. Each minister carries a weight of hope and of expectation from this Parliament and the communities that we are here to serve. To everyone appointed today, I wish you well. Congratulations. And for all of our sakes, please make good choices. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on Jackson Carlaw.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. May I, in the tradition established by my late friend and colleague David McLetchie, set aside the substantive political arguments that are going to engage us in the period ahead and welcome wholeheartedly, in my own way and on behalf of my party, the various new ministers to Parliament. And can I start by adding my own congratulations to Nicola Sturgeon. I hope she will acknowledge that I was at least half right when I stood here 3 years ago and said to her that neither of us would be First Minister after the election. Half right is about as good as it gets these days. But in this day of the long ski and do's, can I also thank the previous ministers, those who retired, the one who might have been wheeled out, so to speak, and those euphemistically let go. But can I say to Fiona Hislop and to Fergus Ewing, if you think back to Michael Russell, to Angela Constance, to Richard Lochhead, to Keith Brown, to Shona Robertson, all sacked and back before midnight, you can yet be the future once again. So sit and brace yourself for the opportunity. I want to congratulate Kate Forbes, Michael Matheson and SES, Shirley-Ann Somerville. The motto of the SES is "Who dares wins," and I think that might be required when it comes to getting a hold of the education brief. And also back to John Swinney. Mr Swinney, of course, we welcome the appointment of a Cabinet Secretary for COVID recovery. He is one of only 3 ex-leaders from the old ex-leaders club in the Parliament. We lost 5 in the last Parliament who departed. And I think Mr Swinney was less happy in education than he was in the first Parliament in dealing with the economy, when he did reach out across parties to get agreement. And I very much hope, if he applies himself in that way, with focus to the recovery from COVID, that as a Parliament we can work together with him to achieve that. It's always a pleasure, of course, to follow the swerves in Humza Yousaf's career. We privately educated public schoolboys need to stick together. As Mr Sarwar and Miss Bailey will acknowledge. And it is quite ironic to me that the only party in Holyrood to have both a leader and a deputy leader who were privately educated is the Scottish Labour Party, which is, I think, quite something. But of course, Mr Yousaf has hidden skills, which I am now able to reveal, because when we had our heroes in the Parliament, Mr Sarwar was a bit aghast, I think, when my hero greeted him and said, "Oh, Humza, it's great to see you. You used to come round to my house and I taught you how to crochet." I didn't know he had crochet skills. I think he looked at me and thought, oh God, that's going to get revealed at some point. Whatever he was crocheting in justice, though, was full of holes. But he does like to dress up. He does like to dress up. I mean, as Transport Secretary, there he was in the tunnels with Network Rail in a high-vis vest. Then he was on the train in a guard's uniform, waving a red flag. Then, of course, he was out with the police on the beat in a high-vis visibility vest. Does anybody believe that by the end of next week, Mr Yousaf will not be photographed in swabs wielding a scalpel over some poor unsuspecting patient in the NHS? But I do look forward to working with them, and in particular, personally, can I say, on fulfilling the commitment made by Jean Freeman at the end of the last Parliament to a bill on the restitution for women affected by mesh. Angus Robertson arrives with us too. Now, Angus Robertson is really hitherto only known to us here as a mercifully briefer, non-simple millionaire crofter version of Ian Blackford. But we do look forward to him. When he has been here in the past, I have noticed he has a penchant in honour of his heritage of alpine mountain jackets that he's inclined to wear. And I've been told by some of his colleagues that at the royal opening there is the very real prospect of him polishing up some lederhosen and appearing suitably attired, which I hope for Her Majesty's sake and amusement is true. I look forward I look forward to Marie Goujon. I actually think this must be one of the most popular appointments. I've always found Marie Goujon very easy to work with. Unfortunately for me, when we were in Dublin once, I was filling my face with chocolate muffins and coffee as she came back from like a 20-mile run around the city, which kind of rather showed the difference between us. But I do welcome her to her appointment and wish her well. Shona Robeson, we welcome back. She has obviously done work on social justice. I look forward to that. Mr Brown is back as well. He has a marvellous ability to make things up and to repeat them with a poker face on television, which is an odd talent in the Justice Brief. But members may not know that Mr Brown makes a spectacular appearance in Sacha Swire's racy and salacious Diary of an MP's Wife on page 182. Mr Brown is there. I leave it to colleagues to look it up for themselves to decide whether it is a climactic or mundane insertion, but you can establish this for yourself. I also welcome the fact that he has been appointed as a Veterans Minister. I congratulate George Adam and Stacey the Enforcer on their appointments to the business management roles, and a word of congratulation to Tom Arthur. He alone, among the backbenchers, did not put himself forward to be the Deputy Presiding Officer last week. And I think a ministerial reward should be welcomed for that simple fact and appreciated by so many of us who endured for so long last Friday afternoon. So, well deserved. Finally, to Mary McCallan, that is quite something, and congratulations. You do realise you've single-handedly destroyed the ambitions of everybody who was here before you, who will now believe that they have been passed over. I can assure them the best thing to do now is to rebel and become totally notorious, and we will support you in that endeavour.
Mr Carlow.
I'm finished now. Presiding Officer, after 14 years, there can be no more honeymoon. We are entitled to expect focus, action and delivery. We'll work with ministers where and when we can and oppose rigorously and robustly where we have to.
Thank you, Mr Carlow.
Those debates are
Mr
serious
Carlow.
and we look forward to engaging in them. But we support the amendment proposals today.
I now call Anna Sarwar, who will join us remotely.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'll start by paying tribute to members who have either part of this reshuffle or retirement left the government. Too often, the cut and thrust of debate in our Parliament gives the impression that to disagree means to dislike. That is not the case. So while we make no apologies for the disagreements we've had when we're fighting for better public services, better outcomes for people, a better government, I will recognise that when we do agree, and I will also recognise the service that ministers have given to our country. So I pay tribute and thank them all. To the departing ministers, Aileen Campbell, Jean Freeman, Fergus Ewing and Fiona Hislop, I think on Aileen Campbell, it highlights the challenges of family life and also parliamentary work, something I'm learning a lesson the hard way on this week, and demonstrates how much more work we have to do in our politics. A special thank you to Jean Freeman. It is not an easy retirement to be Health Secretary in the midst of a global pandemic in your last months and days as a minister, so a genuine thank you to Jean Freeman. And also can I thank Fiona Hislop and Fergus Ewing for all the positive engagement I've always had with them in their roles as Cabinet Secretaries. I welcome all the new appointments. I pledge and my party pledges to work with them when we agree and where we can. I welcome the overarching Cabinet Secretary for the National Recovery. I would say, though, that John Swinney must do a better job of managing this proclaimed national mission of national recovery than he did managing the last proclaimed national mission of the last Parliament. And if he does that work and takes it seriously, we will work with him. I also welcome Shirley-Anne Somerville, and I wish her well. She has a huge task in rebuilding trust in our education sector and delivering the education catch-up that all of our children need, as well as making sure we avert a similar crisis this summer to what we had last summer. From one deputy, from John Swinney, to another deputy, the SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown, I welcome him back to government. It must be an interesting change for him. He had to use First Minister's questions in order to communicate with the First Minister in the last parliamentary term. At least in this parliamentary term, he gets to communicate round the Cabinet table. He has an important job of work to do in the Justice portfolio. We need to confront the continued and disproportionate hate and violence directed at women across our country, and we need to heal the deep divisions that exist in our society. I would caution members across all parties in the chamber, though, that we can't pretend that our political discourse is separate to those deep divisions that we see in our society. and I also welcome him taking up the Veterans Minister position. I think that's always important, but doubly important given the role the armed forces have played to getting us through this pandemic, and it's important that all our armed forces and our veterans are recognised in this Parliament. And to another who believes he is the deputy, perhaps, Angus Robertson. Both Angus Robertson and I share a deep love for Lossiemouth. We both have fond memories and fond stories about Lossiemouth, and I will welcome him to this Parliament, and I wish him well. I do take the point that Willie Rennie and the Liberal Democrats make in their appointment, or their objection to the appointment of a Minister on the Constitution. What I would say, though, is I have, and my party has, less of an issue with the ministerial title and more with how the government will behave. And so we will be holding the government on their promise of focusing on recovery. There are, of course, issues we need to discuss around the wider Constitution, Brexit and the impact of that being one example. So we have no objection to the title, but we do object if the government behaves inappropriately and takes the eye off the ball on that recovery. I welcome back the beefed up role that Kate Forbes played. We had a very, very good and detailed relationship with Kate Forbes in the last Parliament. We hope we can take that forward in future budgets. I hope she doesn't resort to the cheaper deals she gets from the Greens on occasion, and does work with the Labour Party to have greater investment in those frontline public services. And I hope she will take how serious it is that we give continued business support coming through this pandemic if we are to stop an economic crisis. We also welcome back Shona Robertson to the government. Shona and I had many robust exchanges, it's fair to say, in her last cabinet portfolio, but we sincerely wish her well. We would have liked to have seen a dedicated social security cabinet secretary in this Parliament, given the scale of the powers and the scale of the ambition I think that we need in this Parliament. But we will be pushing her and her team to go further and faster on what we can do with that portfolio. I also congratulate Humza Yousaf on taking the Health Secretary's position. He may well be asking what he has done to upset the First Minister in the last Parliament to take on such a challenging role in this Parliament, but there is no greater privilege than to lead our National Health Service, so we genuinely wish him well. There were huge challenges facing our NHS pre the pandemic. They have been exacerbated by the pandemic, and we will be pushing him further on cancer services and mental health services in this Parliament. We welcome Marie Goujon to her role and hope that she will force all of us in the Parliament, but indeed the government, make sure that we have a recovery that works for all parts of Scotland, not just the central belt of Scotland. And we also welcome the more beefed up role for Michael Matheson, recognising the opportunity that we have at COP26.
Mr Sarwar, yeah, I'd be grateful if you could conclude.
Officer, I want to congratulate colleagues and you and say that when we agree, we will work with you, and when we disagree, we won't be afraid to do so. But let's recognise the huge challenge our country faced, and let's deliver a national recovery for him. Thank you, Officer.
I now call Patrick Harvie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to comment, and even more grateful that I'm not following Jackson Carlaw. Can I begin by congratulating sincerely all those who have been appointed and reappointed to ministerial office, and very sincerely thank those who are leaving government for their service. Yes, even Fergus Ewing. Let us thank him sincerely for his service, and perhaps about him, the less I say at a moment like this, the better. The process of ministerial appointments generally achieves consent. After an election, when a government is returned with a fresh mandate, political parties generally agree that it should get on with the job and has to be able to appoint a government to do so. And so, generally, political parties have not voted against ministerial appointments at this time, and Greens will certainly support this one. On the specific criticism, though, of the appointment of a Constitution Secretary, there are, of course, political parties here who oppose independence, as is their right. But are they really saying that even under the existing constitutional arrangements, nobody should do the job? I hope Angus Robertson will advance the case for a referendum, and Greens will work toward that goal as well. But are the Lib Dems really saying that the new government should simply disengage from the more immediate constitutional challenges? Should we ignore the existing dysfunctional constitutional machinery which all political parties in the last session agreed needed to be overhauled? I suspect Angus Robertson will discover, just as Mike Russell did, that it's the UK government which will be the biggest barrier to the successful operation of joint ministerial committees, for example. We have a UK government which is unwilling even to consider a Section 30 order, but which is now prepared routinely to legislate in clearly devolved areas against the refusal of consent by this Parliament. Presiding Officer, COVID recovery is critical, and Greens will take part in the cross-party steering group which is being set up. But we reject the idea that we must choose independence or recovery. For us, the case to be made is independence for recovery. But even opponents of independence surely cannot imagine that what passes for the constitutional machinery of the status quo is working as it should. And so Mr Robertson will have a job on his hands, even aside from the case for a referendum. If I have any concerns about the ministerial appointments, it's on other matters. Adding the words net zero to a Transport and Energy Secretary in Michael Matheson's new role is a welcome focus, as many have said. But does it really mean that he will recognise the need for change and that past Scottish Government transport policies have driven transport emissions up, not down? Only time will tell. And will a change in rural affairs mean that the influence of landowners and defenders of blood sports declines in the agenda of government? Only time will tell. There's no dedicated housing minister, but housing is added to the job title of a Cabinet Secretary. Is this the elevation of the remit or its sidelining at a time when people, especially in the private rented sector, are suffering insecurity and exploitation? And there is no Minister for Immigration, despite the clear need to challenge, as we've seen in recent days, the authoritarian agenda of the UK Home Office and the hostile environment, and to support those communities where our neighbours are at risk because of their immigration or asylum status. As I say, only time will tell how these challenges and many others are addressed by the new government. But at a moment like this, at the beginning of a new session of Parliament, I think every political party should wish the new ministerial team success as they approach these jobs, and the Greens will certainly vote for the motions tonight.
Thank you. I now call on the First Minister to reply.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'll briefly respond to some of the comments made. Let me turn firstly to Alex Cole-Hamilton and the amendment in his name. The first thing I would say is that the appointments to government reflect absolutely, as I think any objective observer would see, the priority that is attached to COVID recovery and indeed to tackling the climate emergency. But on the Constitution portfolio, a couple of points I would make there. Firstly, this is not a new portfolio. It existed in the last Parliament, and as Patrick Harvey has just said, the Constitution is not just about independence. It is about making sure that Scotland's voice is heard in the face of the damaging implications of Brexit, and it's about making sure that Scotland is defended in the face of the Tory power grab on this Parliament and this government. But on the question of independence, the priority I give to COVID recovery, I think, is clear, and I reiterate that today. But the fact of the matter is, independence, and after COVID has passed, giving the people of Scotland the opportunity to choose independence, if that is their wish, is the policy of the government that I lead. And the Liberal Democrats may disagree with that. That is their right. But that does not change that fact. And it doesn't change the fact that the SNP won this election on that manifesto, and the Liberal Democrats went from 5 MSPs to just 4. And perhaps some honest reflection on their part on that might serve them well for their future prospects. Now, turning to Jackson Carlaw, I have to say that talk from Jackson Carlaw of, and I think I noted this down correctly, sudden swerves in other people's careers would only serve to suggest that he hasn't come back from the election having increased his stock of self-awareness. But Jackson Carlaw, having been ousted in a rather undignified way, I hear Douglas Ross muttering from a sedentary position, him being the person who ousted Jackson Carlaw in such an undignified way. But I'm very pleased to see and hear today, of course, that Jackson Carlaw has held on to his much valued role as in-house comedian for the Conservative Party. Although I should say, and I say this with his best interests at heart, that perhaps the jokes about other people being sacked from their posts may need updated in light of his recent personal experience. Patrick Harvey said that he was glad not to be following Jackson Carlaw. I guess there are points during the election campaign where Douglas Ross was wishing that he hadn't followed Jackson Carlaw, but that is another matter altogether. On Anas Sarwar, I think Douglas Ross's mutterings from a sedentary position perhaps suggest that he may need to develop a sense of humour in this Parliament if he's going to flourish in any way. Showing, of course, that my stock of self-awareness is in perfectly healthy condition. On Anas Sarwar, and becoming a tad more serious, he raises good points, particularly on the need to address reform in justice and, of course, in women's justice, which is something that I have asked Ash Denham to pay particular attention to. But can I thank members for their comments, and can I ask Parliament to approve these appointments? This is a government with a big job of work to be done, and a government that is ready, eager now to get on with that job on behalf of the country.
There are 3 questions to be put. The first question is that Amendment 62.1 in the name of Alex Cole-Hamilton, which seeks to amend Motion 62 in the name of Nicola Sturgeon on appointment of Scottish ministers, be agreed. Are we all agreed? Okay, we are not agreed. We will therefore move to a vote, and there will be a short suspension to allow members to access the digital voting system. The question is that Amendment 62.1 in the name of Alex Cole-Hamilton, which seeks to amend Motion 62 in the name of Nicola Sturgeon on appointment of Scottish ministers, be agreed. And members should cast their votes now. And this will be a 2-minute vote. Thank you. The result of the vote on amendment number 62.1 in the name of Alex Cole-Hamilton is yes 4, no 70. There were 51 abstentions and the amendment is therefore not agreed. The next question is that motion 62 in the name of Nicola Sturgeon on the appointment of Scottish ministers be agreed. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed. As the Parliament has agreed to the First Minister's recommendations, she may now invite Her Majesty to approve the appointments. The next question is that motion 63 in the name of Nicola Sturgeon on the appointment of junior ministers be agreed. Are we all agreed? It is now time to move on to the next item of business, which is urgent questions. I have selected 2 urgent questions this afternoon, and I'm going to suggest that we suspend for a few moments just now while we confirm timings. Thank you.